Have you ever held a little baby in your arms? Raise your hand if you have ever held a little baby in your arms. Everybody. A toddler is as delicate and precious as a baby, but able to move around and get hurt. And bigger kids can move faster and farther. And our instinct should be to protect them. So I was reading yesterday about a boy who was probably 12 years old when our nation imprisoned him in 2002. We held him in Afghanistan, and I don't mean held him the way you hold a baby. Thanks, Dave. I mean that we put a hood on him. We stripped him. We shackled him, and we shoved him downstairs. We brought him to Guantanamo, kicked him, beat him, broke his nose, pepper sprayed him, deprived him of sleep for many days. In 2003, he tried to kill himself by slamming his head into a wall. This boy, like most Gitmo prisoners, does not stand accused of international terrorism. The evidence that this boy had at 12 years old fought back against the illegal occupation of his country was obtained through torture. And so our government is seeking to hold him forever without putting him on trial. He's now about 19, having spent his entire teenage years in a death camp, in a place where the only way out appears to be death. And if our government has its way, he will be moved to a different death camp so that we can close Guantanamo. Hooray! And he will be held forever and ever until he dies, with his jailers annually conducting reviews that they will grotesquely refer to as due process. Meanwhile, prosecuting those who tortured this child, those who ordered it done, those who provided legalistic justifications, or those who created the entire torture program is not even under consideration yet. So I was on a radio show last night, and a man called in to accuse me of perversely targeting the United States government for criticism and taking up the cause of the worst criminals on earth, when I could be focusing on fighting diseases that kill many more people than we have tortured. Well, many of us are active in campaigning for better health care, but pointing to some other cause of more deaths and injuries is never an excuse for a crime. A president can pardon torture. It is a crime, but he cannot legally prevent our Justice Department from prosecuting it. And when he does, and we sit back on our couches and cheer for Iranians taking to the streets, then our president and all future presidents acquire the power to ignore all laws. Already our State Department has lost the ability to tell other nations not to torture, including nations that might torture the sort of people that all callers to radio shows in the United States can be counted on to care about, namely Americans. In fact, we can all agree quite easily that torture should be punished when Americans are the victims. The trick is to shift our attention to cases where Americans are the perpetrators and still maintain our ability to think straight. And in fact, a poll today says that a strong majority supports banning all torture. There is no news on what percentage of Americans know that it already is banned. It is not at all clear, in fact, that any disease that I could be researching a cure for takes more lives than U.S. torture has. We've tortured many people to death. According to the U.S. military and the FBI, U.S. torture has been a major recruiting tool for anti-U.S. terrorists and a cause of the death of thousands of Americans. And we tortured to force false confessions justifying an attack on Iraq. We even did so after the invasion. That invasion and occupation has killed over 1 million Iraqis and thousands of Americans at enormous cost in dollars and safety and prospects for peace. One justification for this war was to stop Iraqi torture. And now Iraq tortures, and we cannot say a word against it. In fact, we can say nothing against any war crimes or the crime of aggressive war. We have made the greatest horrors permissible. Most of the people we have tortured have been innocent of any wrongdoing, and there is no evidence that torture has saved a single life. Expert interrogators do not use torture because it does not work as quickly or as reliably as other methods. So torturing someone to save your kidnapped child, which callers to radio shows will explain to you is the reason for all torture, would actually be less likely to save your kidnapped child than using a skilled interrogator. Torturing people brutalizes the torturers as well, damaging them and those they have to live with. Torturing damages our society, brutalizing the thoughts and practices of prison guards, police, and citizens. And most damaging of all, torture establishes the myth that certain people cannot be spoken to and must be brutalized. This creates horrible prejudices because the people who supposedly must be tortured are always defined as part of a certain racial, religious, or cultural group that comes to be seen as subhuman. This allows torturing them to be justified as both an interrogation tool and a punishment, without any need for logical coherence. So torture is illegal and it is morally wrong, with no imaginable utilitarian exceptions to that rule. It is our job not just to condemn torture, but to prevent it and to deter it. And the only way to deter it is to stop treating it as a policy difference, start treating it as a crime, and quit attempting to look forward with our heads shoved up our ass. Numerous reports document ongoing torture in Iraq, in Bagram, and in Guantanamo. As long as torture is not treated as a crime, as the crime that our laws make it, prison guards holding people outside any rule of law are going to torture. You cannot end torture and yet not punish it, because only punishing it can end it. Justice Marshall back there must think we've put a king back on the throne. Now, there may be a vote today in Congress on whether to require that the military videotape its interrogations. That will be a start, if it could get through the Senate. But will there be a penalty for not doing so, or for destroying the tapes, which has already happened? And what about the FBI and the CIA? The President's Task Force on Interrogations is expected to recommend that teams formed from these two agencies interrogate captives one way if they plan to charge them with any crimes, and a different way if they just plan to illegally hold them. Our founding fathers designed systems expecting the worst of people. This plan expects better than angels. And as long as we do not prosecute torture, these are the sorts of plans we will have. You know, as I've already mentioned, the Park Service threatened to charge us with a crime if we demonstrated waterboarding here today. The Park Service should all be out of their offices and marching with us at 12 o'clock to the Justice Department, where we will expect the same demand to be made with regard to Richard B. Cheney. So welcome, Mr. Fourth Branch. Well, I work with a lot of groups. I want to just say something briefly about PDA, Progressive Democrats of America. And I want to mention someone who should come right out here in the middle of this plaza and raise her hand.
Generator, Mike.
I want to mention someone from PDA who's done more than anybody else to put these events today all over the country together and make them happen. And that's Joanne O'Neill. And she needs to get out from under those trees, come out here in the middle of this place, and raise her hand up in the air. Come on, we can't see you. 3 cheers for Joanne. There are, in fact, events happening in dozens of cities, many of them led by PDA today, including a couple of events in California where formal complaints are being filed with the Ninth Circuit Court against Judge Jay Bybee. The leading torture memo author, John Yu's boss, the authority in pretending to legalize torture, who, unlike the judge who was just impeached by the United States House of Representatives for lying about sex, the only thing anybody cares about in this country anymore, who's in a position of power and who was already in prison, this judge is free to roam the earth and has a lifetime seat, overruling the opinions of judges who actually give a shit what the law says. Jay Bybee needs to be impeached, he needs to be indicted, and he needs to be disbarred, and now he needs to be thrown out by the Ninth Circuit, and we are pursuing all of these angles. And PDA has been leading this charge not just for the past 5 months, but for the past 5 years, and has been pushing back against these wars since before they began, and pushing back against these crimes through a demand for impeachment since these crimes happened, since the Democrats took the majority on a promise they would change things in 2007. So I encourage everybody to go to pdamerica.org, as well as the websites of all of the groups represented here today.